Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Delgado, and welcome to my presentation about the importance of protecting Indigenous people in Colombia. Here's my introduction, Understanding Indigenous Environments in Colombia. This presentation is dedicated to exploring the importance of Indigenous people in Colombia. From their rich cultural traditions to their deep connection with the land, Indigenous communities play a role in the country's identity and history. By learning more about their contributions, challenges, and resilience, we can better appreciate their impact and the need to protect their rights and way of life. Here's my first article breakdown, Indigenous Leadership in Sustainability. The article is titled Indigenous and Local Communities Initiatives Have Transformative Potential to Guide Shift Towards Sustainability in South America. This article is about mostly all indigenous communities in South America, but it does have a huge focus on Colombia's indigenous people and the importance that they play in their community. Um, this article features over 120 indigenous-led environmental projects in Colombia. It highlights initiatives called iSeeds that showcase community-based models for sustainability, focuses on land protection, reforestation, cultural education, and climate action. It highlights indigenous knowledge as practical and transformative and not just a traditional tool. It also proves that indigenous communities are active leaders and not just passive victims. For example, indigenous communities in Colombia lead over 120 sustainability projects known as iSeeds. These community-based efforts protect land, restore ecosystems, and preserve culture. This shows that indigenous people are not just protectors of tradition, but innovators at shaping the future of environmental care. I think that this article is super important because with the issue of trying to take indigenous people out of their communities and displace them and just kind of destroy their lands, this article shows all the good that these indigenous people do for Colombia. It highlights how they grow a lot of the country's produce. It highlights how they actually provide a lot of the like the natural medicines or remedies. And a lot of people don't know about that. And they're big supporters of getting rid of these groups of people, even though they are benefiting off of these groups of people. A lot of the food that they eat are coming from these groups of people. A lot of the medicines that they use that they're not getting from the doctors or pharmacies come from these people. So I think that this article is very important at breaking down the importance of indigenous communities in Colombia by showing how much they do for their land and they do for their community. The next article that I chose is an article titled Genocide and Ecocide in Four Colombian Indigenous Communities. This article highlights case studies of four different Colombian indigenous communities facing ecocide and cultural genocide. It highlights the harm caused by extremism, armed conflict, and land disposition. It frames violence against indigenous land as both an ecological crisis and a criminal issue. It reveals the interconnection between environmental and human rights in Colombia and supports the need for legal and social accountability. Destruction of indigenous lands in Colombia isn't just environmental damage, it's a violation of human rights. Case studies show how extractive industries and conflict lead to cultural erasure. Protecting indigenous lands means protecting lives, history, and justice. So we need to protect these people because a lot of them are being taken and just put into new places and taken into places where they don't know. Like they're getting their culture changed. They're having to rely on assimilation. They're being taken from all these beautiful lands and placed into cities that they don't really know how to function in because they're indigenous people and they're so used to just being connected with the land and not connected with a city or other people. So I think that this article is super important, and the reason I wanted to highlight it is because after the first article of explaining the importance of indigenous people in Colombia and in other countries, I think this is a good article to back that one up with because it just shows all the hardships that these people are going through and how, regardless of the hardships that they're going through, they're still being resilient and trying to do as best they can for the community and their environment. These people are being taken away, they're being disrespected, a lot of them are being killed, a lot of the women there are being, it's just a lot that is going on. And regardless of all that, they're still just trying to protect their land. They're still just trying to provide for Colombia, provide the produce that Colombia needs, the flowers, the medicines, all this stuff, even though they're being disrespected. So I think that this is a very important article to highlight because it just shows how important the indigenous people are in Colombia, and it also highlights the hardships that they are going through. And in relation to this topic, I think that it just opens up everybody's eyes, especially mine, to realize how brutal these hardships actually are and how what they're going through is not humane at all. And a lot of it needs to be recognized because a lot of unjust things are going on over there, regardless of these people just trying to be there for their community and their environment. These people hold a lot of culture that Colombia has lost, and if we delete all of them, we're just going to delete all of that rich culture as well with them. So I think that the reason that I included this article is just to show you guys a feature of how the people are being treated and how, regardless of how they're being treated, they're still there, just trying to provide and be as good as they can for the land and the sustainability of the country. For my video, I chose to choose a video from YouTube, but from Indigenous University. This video is completely about the MySec Indigenous community in Colombia, and the video directly supports the core message of my presentation that Indigenous people in Colombia are essential to both environmental protection and cultural resilience. It completes academic sources like Mercon, which emphasizes indigenous-led sustainability initiatives, and it reflects the lived reality behind the threats and challenges described in Goya's. And the video helps humanize the research and show the strength and leadership within indigenous communities. This short documentary highlights the MySec, an indigenous community in Colombia, and their efforts to preserve their ancestral knowledge, language, and land. It focuses on how the MySec people are reclaiming their identity through education, sustainable agriculture, and self-governance. The video gives an inspiring look at how indigenous communities are not only protecting their environment, but actively shaping Colombia's future. This is a very important and moving video because it just demonstrates how crucial and how big the role these indigenous people play in the context of Colombia as a whole. Like I've said before, a lot of the produce, a lot of the flowers, a lot of the medicine coming from natural remedies and stuff like that are created by these indigenous groups like the MySAC. The MySAC is not responsible for all of it, but they do hold a small responsibility for the larger issue of we cannot delete these communities because they are very, very, very beneficial to the country. And we ultimately need to respect them more because, like I said before, a lot of the things that Colombian people are eating on a day-to-day basis, using as medicines on a day-to-day basis, come from these indigenous environments and they have no idea. And a lot of those people are supporters of taking away these indigenous people because they want to use those lands as resorts, as things like that, which is super unjust. And I think that the next important factor of this video is that it truly shows that if we don't protect these indigenous communities, we are not protecting the future of Colombia. These indigenous people play a huge role in shaping what the future is going to look like in Colombia. They offer a lot of initiatives to cities about how to cool the city by using plants and things like that. They are very resilient in the way that they live and that the way that they use foods and the way that they use medicine. So with if we lose them, we're going to lose all of those great ideas, all of those great things that these people offer. So I think that this video is super important in highlighting the importance of indigenous people, and it goes to show why we need to protect them and not remove them from their lands. In conclusion, indigenous communities are essential protectors of Colombia's ecosystem, biodiversity, and cultural heritage. A lot of the indigenous communities are truly the only ones holding Colombia's true history. A lot of people look at Colombia nowadays and they think partying, drugs, and just clubbing, which is not true. Colombia has a very deep, 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 deep cultural history with it relying on the indigenous people. As we can see in these images, there's a lot of different ways that they dress. They dance in certain ways. They have like spiritual meditation forms. They just hold a lot of culture that Colombia is not known for. And I believe personally that's the culture it should be known for and not the culture of partying, going out, drinking, stuff like that. Um, and then I also wanted to mention that despite facing violence, displacement, and environmental harm, many groups lead powerful efforts in sustainability and justice. This is tying back to that first article showing all of the sustainability projects that Colombian indigenous groups lead and how they are trying to protect the land and make their land better for them as well as the community, regardless of all the violence that they're facing and all the issues and hardships that they're going through. Indigenous knowledge offers a real solution to climate challenges through community-led and land-based practices. This is huge. Colombia was dealing with the huge issue of climate change in their city of Medellin, where the city was getting way too hot A lot of people there don't have AC, things like that. A scientist went to an indigenous community and realized that the indigenous community was using specific plants and specific trees and planting them in certain formats in order to provide better shade and provide better cooling for their environment so then they implemented that into the cities, which just shows how innovative these indigenous communities are and how important it is to keep them around because they do provide great ideas for a lot of the issues that we have. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is protecting indigenous rights is not just ethical, but it's necessary for Colombia's future. Yeah, guys, not only is it ethical to protect these groups, but it's also super important in the concept of Colombia's future. Because if we keep on removing these people, what is Colombia going to have? Nothing. Colombia relies on these people. A lot of the fruit, a lot of the foods, a lot of the flowers that we see around the world that we buy here in the United States come from Colombia that are being grown by indigenous cultivators and indigenous peoples and indigenous environments. So if we delete them, what future is Colombia going to have? They're known for their production of flowers. They're known for their production of coffee. They're known for all this stuff. And if we delete these indigenous people, if we're going to lose all that with it, and Colombia's just going to be nothing. It's just going to be another country that offers nothing to the world. Finally, indigenous peoples in Colombia are not only guardians of tradition, but leaders in environmental and social resilience. Their voices, knowledge, and rights must be at the center of any effort to protect the land and create a just future. For example, if we want to protect the land, we have to protect these indigenous communities as well because they are the true protectors of the land. They care for it more than anybody else in that country. So if we keep on deleting them, we're going to keep deleting our own resources and things like that, which I think is very bad for Colombia's future. Here are my references cited in APA format along with the links. For the sake of the time of this video, I'm not going to click and break and go into the articles to show you. I will just provide them in the comment section of my submission so that you can go in and see them yourself. Overall, thank you guys so much for watching my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed and understood my topic of this project. And overall, Professor, thank you so much for a great semester, and I hope you're doing well.